and we have to get past that. We have to get past the reactionary world and stay in a proactive world of saying, what are the things we can do to put in place to keep people safe here, now, and tomorrow? And there are things there that we can do.
Hello and welcome to Knox and Friends. I'm Neil Zipser, and today we'll be examining an issue that we really wish we didn't have to, and that is active shooters and hostile events at our nation's schools. This past year, Knox was celebrating our 50th anniversary, and for most of that time, our products have helped first responders, primarily firefighters, with rapid access solutions. Today, however, our rapid access solutions are an integral part to a response strategy by law enforcement who have to gain access to lockdown schools. I'm joined today by Dr. Kevin Eberle, the president of Ed Ingenuity. Thank you for joining us today, Kevin. Typically,
Neil, thanks for having me.
oh, you got it. Typically I provide a brief background of our guest, but today I'm going to do something different. I'm going to let you provide the background, your own background, because it's very unique in that you have both law enforcement experience and you were a former school administrator and principal for many years. So Kevin, give us your story.
Yeah, it is a little unique. I retired a few years ago. It's been 3 years now, retired as a school administrator. But it all started back over 40 years ago. I was a criminal justice major back in the 70s, and I decided I was going to try to get to the FBI, and I applied all over the country and ended up going to a police department down in Hampton, Virginia, in the late 70s, early 80s. And I started off as a patrol officer, and from New York down to Virginia, they actually they like New Yorkers for some reason. Maybe we're just fast talkers and decision makers, but I aspired up pretty quickly through the tactical team, and I became a SWAT team officer early on in my career on the police department. And those were my foundation years of real critical thinking and decision making that on the police department as a young in my 20 type uh, in my 20s, and I just looked at it as something I really wanted to do. Something strange happened though. Halfway through going through as a tactical officer, they chose us to be instructors in the police academy, and I started teaching in the police academy pretty much all the really cool stuff that everybody wanted: firearms instructor, the traffic investigation. But then I started getting into constitutional law and getting into social studies, and I really had a knack for teaching, and I really liked that part of it. So I made a big decision several years into it. After about 7 years, I decided that I was going to come back up to New York and possibly pursue an education degree in public education. So I took all those skills that I had on the police department, from decision making and safety, and my career there. It was something that I really liked, and I transitioned, started teaching up in New York, actually a criminal justice class. So I transitioned over from police academy to actually teaching criminal justice in a vocational school, and then quickly aspired up into administration. I became an administrator probably within 5, 6 years in New York, and I didn't look back. I 25 years as a school principal. I pretty much did everything. I did was a teacher, counselor, assistant principal, and then I aspired up. Ended up my career in Buffalo Public Schools, and I aspired up to the chief operating officers of the entire district under a cabinet position under the superintendent, where I was actually in charge of facilities and security. So that really was full circle over a 40-year period of time of taking my police skills and taking up in education and looking at safety and keeping kids safe and teachers safe. So it was a unique background to start off and go into education. And now presently I'm retired, but I have my own consulting firm for safety, leadership, and safety with Ed Ingenuity. And I basically go around helping superintendents and school boards talking about all the different safety issues that schools have and what I can do to help as a consultant to help and use my experience that I've had all through the years to help reshape the culture and fabric of many school districts.
Yeah, not to date you or anything. I think you said 40 years, but back then school shootings weren't a big deal when you started your career. What changed and how did law enforcement and schools adapt to that?
Well, it's interesting. I look back in retrospect, back in the 80s, we never really even though we did a lot of training with school entries and a lot of the things for our tactical teams, when I really look back and in retrospect, we really didn't have a lot of instances of school incidents back in the 70s in the police department. I think this country, even though statistically and data, there were hundreds of school incidences prior to the turning point, I believe, was in 1999 with Columbine. I think Columbine was the turning point for what I call, the contagious effect. Basically, they actually have it out there, the contagion effect on the media, basically changed the look because it was instant. Basically, it was all over the media, all over the news. Columbine was really, I think, our turning point. You see a lot of copycats through the years from Columbine. There's a lot of things of fame seeking and copycatting, and I think a lot of things changed into the 90s and the 2000s, especially when it comes to firearms. I'm a huge, I mean, teaching constitutional law, I'm a big constitutionalist, so the Second Amendment is big to me. But I think there were some different things for access of weapons in a lot of these situations that have changed over the last 20 years. And when you, again, looking, I'm a researcher, so as far as my doctorate I did with restructuring schools in New York City, it had to do with culture and relationships. But when you get into safety, it really gets into talking about, access, a lot of the different things that the shooters have had, I think have changed a lot in the last 20 years. And that wasn't like that back in the 70s and 80s, even though the data starts ironically from 1966. And that was a famous, I don't know if you wouldn't be old enough to remember this, but it was a famous shooting. It was called the Texas Tower, where in Texas there was a famous shooting that started the whole thing. So data literally has been starting from any kind of mass shootings from 1966, from the Texas Tower shooting. But it really didn't change until, but I think, in 1999 when Columbine started. And from there, the media and every aspect of it is instant. So we pretty much see all the different things that are going on in these last 20 years that has really changed quite a bit.
Do you think when Columbine happened that it was seen as a one-off, or do you think schools and in law enforcement at that time adapted accordingly and in a timely manner?
You know, there's interesting things of adaptation to a lot of things, adopting to a lot of stuff, and a lot of the things that I've seen. It's interesting. There's a lot of research out since Columbine, a whole bunch, and the things that have really changed, you start seeing, and I call it sort of it's not going to happen here syndrome type things, and because most cases, most schools are safe. The superintendent of Columbine actually made a comment after that shooting. He said, it's a tragic day in the United States, but 99% of the schools were safe today. Unfortunately, Littleton wasn't. And he just put it in perspective of saying that we still have safe, mechanisms, and safety is really a big piece of schools and keeping kids safe. But in all reality, I think we just didn't know how much violence and how much tragedy was really out there circled around schools, and the things that have gone on with the adapting to all this. I think it's a reactionary world that we've gone into, hardening of schools, looking at the problems, looking at the leg and a lot of the things we're starting to see with behavior threat assessment and a lot of vulnerability studies and a lot of things. Really, I think we're still behind on that when we're adapting to the things that are going on. And media, I think, has a lot to do with it. I mean, there's a lot of stuff because it's instant. There's a lot of things that people want to deal with situations, but depending on school boards, depending on a lot of the different elements that are out there that are hindrance to decision making, make it a difficult spot to really look at safety as the number one priority.
Yeah, and to build on that, I was talking to a school security director a couple weeks ago, and he was telling me that every day in his email box he gets, he said hundreds, he might have been over exaggerating, but he gets a lot of emails from vendors and companies with technologies to battle this issue. But really, there's no silver bullet out there. Can you discuss that more about all the technologies out there and how they have to be, I guess, integrated into a strategy?
This is probably one of the most difficult subject areas that you're going to literally see two sides of a coin as far as philosophy of technology or no technology. I'm one that grew up in the world of minimal technology in schools. So we didn't have cameras back in the day. We didn't have, access systems. We didn't have AI like we have today. And I look at it in two different ways. I mean, right now in the technology world, it's about a $3 billion to $4 billion business as far as I call it a reactionary world with a lot of things. I mean, from shooting to shootings, superintendents, school boards, everybody are alerted by these incidents and hey, you know what? Maybe it could happen here. So we really need to start looking at what we can use in technology to really help us with our overall safety plans. I'm with that. I'm in the camp that, you hear so many different people talking about a lot of access points and camera systems and weapons detection elements are all like theater. And to me personally, it's 2026. I mean, we're coming up on 2026 tomorrow, and it's if the technology is there to assist us, well, then let's see what's a productive way to use it. Unfortunately, on the flip side of it, it's the human element and what I call the multidisciplinary or the multi-layered approaches to safety is integrating both the human element and the technology element together. And that's the tough part, I think, that's happening right now when it comes to school safety. As a principal for as many years as I was, and most of them were in an inner city. I was in Buffalo, New York, and I saw a lot of tragedy and a lot of gang activity and a lot of things that would happen that we were on alert all the time. The human element was alert all the time because we knew something happened the night before and we really dealt with it. I wish I did have the technological elements I had back then when I first started in the city to help assist as far as some of the incidents that occurred. So I'm sort of torn between it. I mean, sometimes I think it could be over hardening, and other times you have to look at the reality of the human element and the training and the professional development that is needed with all of this technology to assist with that. And there's the part that I think is lost. I think the lost part is the professional development and the actual part of talking and building relationships with everybody.
You talked about hardening for a second there, and I think it was really the lesson learned from Parkland was you just can't leave your doors open. They had exterior doors that is unlocked unless they're being monitored. And the shooter went into, I believe it was building 13 and did all the damage we know about there. And since then, schools have been doing a better job hardening themselves and their property to keep the bad guys out. But this can create challenges for law enforcement, correct?
Well, that's the paradox to all of this. With all of the hardening of schools, I mean, what they call, I mean, it sounds prejudiced and it sounds biased as far as men and women and gender, but they call them man boxes as far as the actual entrances to schools, where you have they call it a man box, where they actually have two sets of doors where you can't get into the building without going through the second set of doors. And then some schools have three sets of doors. So when it comes to entrances, schools are addressing it. They're looking at fences, they're looking at door entrances, access controls, visitor management systems, all of these things that are protecting the students and teachers and administration that's their biggest concern, makes it an inhibitor for first responders if something does happen, because then it's not the days where you could just take a crowbar and just open up the door and have an entry team come and use a crowbar. So the hardening of some of these schools, it's a much more difficult time for first responders to get to an incident of, say, for an example, an active shooter or something is in the school. Yesteryear, back in the 80s, as a tactical officer, it was all about silence and quiet entry, and it was slow process using mirrors and all these different maneuvers we would do to get around corners, and it was a slow process. Now the country really took up the British model, which was, you go to the shooter, you go and you just have the whole team respond. So even with the first responders, their police officers come in their cars, they're supposed to go right to the shooter. It's not waiting for the whole tactical team to get there. It's not. Columbine was a perfect example of it. There was a lot of time lapse from the actual entrance up to that school of how many were actually killed. It's an amazing, DeAngelis, the principal, has an amazing biography of all the things that went on with that, the good, the bad, the ugly, and what we've learned from that for the last 25 years. So those are the tough things. So that, again, as I said, it's paradoxical as far as hardening. Yes, we have to keep people out, but what if there is an emergency? So there has to be some type of access control,
Yeah, and
especially for emergency responders.
The Robb Elementary school shooting in Uvalde, Texas, was kind of brought access for law enforcement into new light, and we know how it took law enforcement 49 minutes once they got to the door of the classroom just to get in and get to the
Hmm.
shooter. And you know,
Hmm.
something like having the right key could have made a big difference. Do you believe providing law enforcement access via secure key box, such as a Knox box, should be commonplace on schools?
I, to be honest with you, I mean, of my entire 40, 45 years of experience of both law enforcement, school safety, school leadership, learning, and all the different things that we have to do as far as educating our kids. And this doesn't necessarily just have to be K-12. This is across the board. I am emphatic about this, that I think this should be almost the same as a doorbell or a light. I mean, I think a Knox box is essential. I think for businesses, I think for houses of worship, I think for anything that are going in the world that we're in right now today, for a very minimal cost to go and have an access for law enforcement to come in. It's already there for fire. Knoxbox has been around how many years? I mean, 30, 35, 40 years. I mean, Knoxbox is so fire, it's okay for a fire commissioner or the fire responding to say, well, we got a fire, we got to get in. Well, that's automatic. So we have all these boxes all over the country, but certainly not in the same way it is for law enforcement to respond to an active shooter or a major critical incident to be able to have access. So to me personally, I'm very biased with this. I think it should be everywhere. I think a school should have it. I think businesses should have it. I think it should be a systemic piece that could be, literally to all the way to the legislature to say we need to have this to secure our communities. It's not just about schools. I think it's essential. And again, with all the stories that we've heard of how people are trying to get into some of these buildings, it's a no-brainer to me as far as having something of that simple, very simplistic to use to be able to have an entry to a building.
And looking back to your law enforcement experience, holding a key, one key for the entire community to get in, was this something that you would have wanted as a law enforcement officer?
There's amazing things when it comes to that. When I look back in the days, we had some entry. When I look back, oh my goodness, we had some situations where we had to get entry to these buildings, and in some cases it was tough. I mean, you break through windows, and it was just a dangerous situation to put tactical team members, entry team members of the SWAT team, in harm's way just to try to gain entry to these buildings. So the simplistic plan, holistically. I mean, and again, I'm a systems thinking type guy that goes with education. You always think about outcomes based education and thinking, okay, what's our outcome here? We have to start with an outcome. What do we need? Well, we need to have access. Okay, well, let's design our community safety backwards from that. So it's a simple process, and something like that would have really assisted us. And I've been there personally. I mean, as tactical teams actually see it, where it put our people. I was a sniper up on a rooftop listening to our entry team trying to get into one house with an active shooter. I mean, actually shot one of our officers and shot one of the entry team members coming into the door. It was a really traumatic scenario, and we could have actually had different access to that building. To really deal with the situation in a different way, but we had to try to breach it with battering rams and all the different things that you use, and which is another element here going back to first responders. First responders aren't tactical officers. They don't have the battering rams. They don't have the different equipment in their patrol cars. They're first in the door. How do you get there? I mean, we don't have that. Patrol isn't that work. Or mutual aid, where you're going to have, in case of active shooters or active incidences that are going on within a community, uh, mutual aid or several departments. I mean, we had an incident in Buffalo in one of the high schools that we had the FBI, the ATF, Buffalo Police, state troopers. We had 5 or 6 different municipalities there that basically, unless you had someone at the door to let them in, it was going to be a tough way to get in that door. So those are all different things too for this consistency across the community and a mindset that look at it's all ultimately about safety and how do we keep people safe and how do we get access in an emergency situation. We do it with so many things. Look at our fire alarm systems and our smoke detector systems. Those are automatics. Those are all throughout our society. We have to have smoke detectors. We have to have carbon monoxide detectors. We have to have all these things for safety, and they're mandated legislatively. They're mandated, and it's like, okay, this is one other piece for entry that I think we need to start looking at seriously.
And I'm guessing when you were a principal and school administrator, dollars were on your mind. And if you didn't have to have a broken door, or in the case of the UNLV shooting, 500 broken doors by law enforcement, um, that would have been, beneficial to your budget. And as well as when students and staff come back, you don't want them to see the damaged doors and be re-traumatized. Again, you want things to go back to normal as fast as you can. So that there is a financial part to broken doors too, isn't there?
That's a part that's the unspoken part to all of this. It's like school districts just have unlimited cash on a fund balance to be able to just go take care of all these things. And I've heard of incidences of, thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars of damage. The incident I was talking about in Buffalo that I found out, and just recently, actually, that incident was several years ago, that I heard that they had so much damage to different doors just to go into entry of different doors within that school was in the thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, where a simple key access would have been a great resolution for any entry team coming in. So, yeah, the budget piece is sort of a piece out there for superintendents and principals. Everybody thinking like, well, it's just a slush fund, and it just isn't. It's just not there. And I think for our fiscal responsibility and our budget responsibility for being administrators and leaders of districts, I think it's essential that we do look at the end. Now, you're going to have other people on the other side saying, "Oh, well, life, what are lives worth as far as money, and it's limited." Well, that's not what we're talking about here as far as, comparing saving a life versus entering into a building, saving everybody's lives and keeping everybody safe as we do it. So there's the incident itself, which on average by FBI and Secret Service statistics is anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes of the actual incident itself. And in many of these cases, that it's already been completed by the time first responders get there. So we need to have it when it comes down to how you actually react to the situation, how you actually deal with reunification, how you actually deal with the triage of a scene that is in the works, and how do we actually deal with that? And believe me, I think you know this. I mean, the budget part of it is astronomical in many of these situations, and they just sort of chalk it up to, well, it's just part of life, and it doesn't have to be that way.
Right. So Columbine, Uvalde, Sandy Hook, Parkland, when you hear these names, you automatically relate to a tragedy. Certainly no school, law enforcement agency, or community wants to be on this list. Does this keep superintendents and principals up at night? And what else regarding school safety keeps them up at night?
That's another paradoxical piece. I use the word too many times, but I mean, it's sort of a paradox we're in because I'm in the world that I'm a realist when it comes to perceiving harm and unsafe situations and being a leader. I had a different background from law enforcement, looking at it where every single day in the city, I was looking at the news. I was alert to everything that was going on the streets, all the things that happened the night before. So I was aware of the next day, what we needed to do, prepare humanistically. I mean, and the human element, what we had to do to deal with retaliations and all the different elements that are there. Unfortunately, in this country, I'm going to quote Alison Levine, who climbed Mount Everest and the seven highest mountains of the world. She's my hero of heroes of the Grand Slam of Adventurers. She said this, and I use it all the time at the same way. She's at the peak of Mount Everest, is saying, fear is okay for the mountaineer at 27,000 feet. It's complacency that kills or gets people hurt. And I think we're in the world of complacency. I think we're really in the world of complacency of from incident to incident that really alerts people to actually react to what we need to do to keep our places safe. So there are a lot, I think, and not speaking for every superintendent in the country or every principal, I think there are a lot of people that are dealing with everyday occurrences of fights and bullying and suicides and all the things that are happening immediate right here and now in their schools. And the long-term thought process is, hey, is this going to happen here? I think becomes complacent. I think a lot of people say, hey, that's going to happen somewhere else. So that's not at the top of our priority list, even though they say it is, and it's a, of anything that we have to do to actually structure a safety plan or behavior threat assessments and all the different things. Some schools are doing some incredible things when it comes to behavioral threat assessment, trauma-informed care. That's the big focus now that people are starting to realize we have to go back to the human element and saying, what do we need to do to really understand human behavior and see if we can react to this before it happens and not spend all the money on the hardening, but let's talk about humans. So I guess what it comes back to the original question of saying what do people, really think about when you hear of all these different incidents? And I think we go from, unfortunately, from shooting to shooting. And we haven't heard of anything. Now, Brown University was a month ago. Everybody in that whole entire area was all up and tons, all the different things at Brown, and now it's back to normal back there. People are still walking down the street. Everything's there. The guy, the shooter's dead, and all these different things are going on. So we go to the next day, and so we go to the next incident, and that's the unfortunate thing I think we're living in, and we have to get past that. We have to get past the reactionary world and stay in a proactive world of saying, what are the things we can do to put in place to keep people safe here, now, and tomorrow? And there are things there that we can do. Your Knox box, the Knox box itself is a perfect example of that for entrances and things that you can do, or AI and cameras where they can actually detect guns and different things. I think are some things out there that we can use. It's not really theater.
When you do talk to school administrators, principals, superintendents, um, eh, does it really come down to dollars when they're making decisions, or is it what is their priorities, and how do you walk them through what to employ? Is it differ by school to school, or how do you do that?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, there's a lot of districts. I know I was in Buffalo. It was basically wanted to call it a building-based budgeting type process where each principal could look at their own individual budgets. New York City, I know, is like that. They have uh, so many administrators in schools that there's a lead administrator that deals with the budget. And, I mean, some schools in the city of New York, I mean, they decide what they need. Do they need more security? Do they need more reading specialists? Do they need more teachers? They decide on their building base what they need. Smaller districts, which is most of the country, is based in suburban and rural areas when you really think about it. I mean, the urban settings, there's 80 to 100 urban settings that really have anything over 30,000 students. But most are suburban and rural, 4 or 5,000 students down to 500. And it really is the superintendent's decision. And they have to weigh curriculum and learning and textbooks, and not so much textbooks now because it's all electronic and a lot of things, but I mean, all the different things of learning and teaching is the priority to them. And again, if this wait and see, or it's not going to happen here, I think takes a, up on the shelf type mentality to a lot of budget decisions. And when it looks at some budgets, as far as things that it's out of sight, out of mind, they're thinking like, do we really need that? It's interesting how it is when it comes to, as you say, like access points or access key systems, where you have a simple thing, which is a minimal budget type thing, is amazing how indecision is still out there when it comes to different things, like where we're saying that this should be an automatic piece. We put cameras, hundreds of thousands, millions of cameras all over this country for a reactionary type system that very few people really monitor it on a daily basis. It's really just a monitor, and if something happens, it happens. And okay, we saw it on the camera, but it already happened. And it's a reactionary type system, and it's something that we have to really start looking at. So it's difficult for people to really balance their budgets and really look at, okay, what are the priorities when you have all these different factions that are out there? School systems itself is a different animal also, because most are run by school boards, and by school boards mostly unpaid school board members that are politically driven to do different things. They want to be judges, they want to move on to different things in the political arenas. They become school board members. there's a lot of indecision because of that, and they think that they're the budget bureau, and that their fiscal responsibility to transfer their skills over to whatever else they want to do. Some are very loyal to the district. Most are. That's a lot of hard work for school board members, incredible work they do. But decisions are made at that table sometimes, to me personally, in the wrong direction when it comes to safety.
Well,
They always say
Kevin,
safety is the number one priority.
yeah.
The number one priority is it safety or is it not? So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Sorry, I cut you off.
Oh, no problem. That's a good thought to conclude with today, actually. Kevin, I can't thank you enough for your time and insight on this very serious issue. Like I said before, we wish we didn't have to talk about this, but it's one we can't ignore either. We have to take, as you basically said, proactive measures to make sure that both schools and law enforcement are ready for these type of events. So thanks again, Kevin. Happy New Year to you, and good luck.
Happy New Year to you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Kevin.